started, and I suspect some of the newspapers may be mentioning it.
Hello, Stuart. Yes, those last two socialist candidates to take on Nicolas Sarkozy at next year's presidential election did face off on telly last night, François Hollande and Martine Aubry, and it is, of course, on this morning's front pages. Libération today's got Hollande and Aubry, now it's serious. Unfortunately, they're complaining that it was a bit too serious and really quite boring inside. You might remember yesterday I was telling you they were hoping they'd get the knives out and really lay into each other. That didn't really happen, unfortunately. There's not too much between them, the paper says, either in terms of policy or even in terms of the style or the kind of president they say that they want to be. So the paper really says it could have been more interesting. They don't even pick a winner in their editorial, saying just that discussing policies is useful for democracy. It helps the voters feel a bit involved, but they're not even convinced that this kind of TV debate actually changes many voters' minds.
That's not very juicy, Elena. I mean, what happened? There were supposed to be big rivalries breaking out, big personality clashes.
Well, there is a slightly more gossipy article inside of Libération about Ségolène Royal. Of course, she was the big loser of last weekend's first round primary vote. She got just 7% of votes. She, of course, was the party's candidate against Nicolas Sarkozy back in 2007. And also François Hollande's long-term ex. Now, she's been quite harsh about him since they split up just after that 2007 election campaign, saying that the process of splitting up with him was a living hell. And then during this campaign, she's really laid into him on things like his lack of experience. She hasn't pulled the punches, but now she's called on her supporters to back him. Why? Well, Libération thinks she might detest Martine Aubry even more after Aubry beat her to the place of becoming socialist leader at the party congress in 2008 by just 102 votes. So there are some personal rivalries in today's papers.
I can't believe it. They all love each other, really. Honestly, they do. What about the other papers then? What are they saying?
Well, Le Figaro, obviously not particularly impressed with either candidate last night, really. They say that there's still the status quo after last night's debate, neither of them surprised in any way. The most interesting piece in here, actually, though, is about a new announcement made by the Interior Minister, Claude Guéant. He tells the paper that from now on, foreigners applying to become French are going to have to pass a French language test, which at the moment they don't have to, but he says he wants to bring France in line with other European countries like Britain and Germany that do require people who are applying for nationalisation to pass a language test. He says he might also institute a history test as well, but even the right-wing paper Le Figaro says that might be a bit much to ask of immigrants because most French citizens probably couldn't pass a history test.
Probably true. Now, you're also looking at an article which is appeared on a website about an historical anniversary that's coming up here in France.
Yes, this is on the news site Rue 89. This is about the anniversary of the 17th of October 1961, which is when 300 Algerians were killed on a police crackdown on a demonstration they were having here in Paris against the then French occupation of Algeria. Hundreds more were injured and hurt in that massacre, which was a really very quite violent police crackdown. The article calls it a massacre that was organised by the very right-wing then Mayor of Paris, Maurice Papon, who was previously a bureaucrat under the Vichy regime who sent hundreds of Jews to Auschwitz. He was eventually tried for crimes against humanity in 1997 because of that, although the Algerian massacre wasn't mentioned in that trial. Now, the article says it's been forgotten by history, which shouldn't have been allowed to happen. They say it was one of the worst atrocities of France's colonial occupation of North Africa, and the government should be doing something to commemorate that 50th anniversary. Unfortunately, they're doing nothing. There's no official commemoration organised in Paris, and there's some quite shocking photos in this article as well of hundreds of bodies floating down the Seine after that 1961 massacre. So they're really calling on the government to organise some kind of commemoration, as are lots of North Africans living in Paris, where of course there's a huge Algerian community, but the government so far has said nothing.
OK, we shall see if there do turn out to be any kind of commemorations. Just under a week's time, in fact, isn't it, that anniversary? Elena, thanks very much. That's Elena with the French newspapers here on France 24. Coming up in Focus, we're going to be speaking to the convicted Islamic radical